I'm being joined right now by Abhishek Singhvi, who's a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, also a three-time MP and a CWC member. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. My first question to you, sir. How do you look at what transpired in the court today? I mean, the SBI asked for date after the election results were supposed to come out even, and the Supreme Court turns around and asks, what were you doing for 26 days? And then asks, you have filed a petition for something that we never sought also in the order. Why are you coming up with that? Just give us the data that is available with a click of a button.
Let me start by saying that when this judgment came in February, if you see my tweets, I had in some sense prophesied. I said, now the blocking, the delay, the avoidance, and the evasion game will start by not actually furnishing the data, or at least not doing it for some time. I tweeted saying, I hope it's only an apprehension. I hope it doesn't come true. Number two, it did come through. It did come true. But even as avoidance and blocking techniques go, this was one of the most ham-handed, clumsy, and gauche attempts. You sleep for almost the entire month. You make an application which is completely lacking in particulars about what you were doing. And it is so blatant and so obvious and so crass because you straight away, after 1 month of silence, do the government's bidding by giving a date of 30th June. So I think it couldn't be more crass and crude in the attempts, as if the SBI is an agent for the government. And I think the court, despite using words of studied moderation, was pretty scathing when it said that we expect some candor from the SBI. I think it was an ill-conceived application. It was a motivated application. It made the SBI look like some kind of a sub-department of a department of the government, and it made it an agent.
And that actually, Mr. Singhvi, is where perhaps the irony of our democracy really rests. As this case unfolded and the remarks that came from our judges and what you're talking about, SBI being seen as an agent, at least perceived with this, is very ironical and coming before the elections. But Mr. Singhvi, I have to ask you one more question. That is, now this court order of what it requires from the SBI does not require it to match the donations with the political parties that they have got, the electoral bonds that have been bought by the political parties. So for a viewer and a voter who's going to vote in months to come, how much of this information that may come out in public domain tomorrow is going to be empowering?
It's an interesting question. Let me answer it in simple terms. Firstly, would you be trying to defer something to 30th June unless at least some of this minimalist information you are scared of? Sneha, is that normal conduct by you that you try and avoid it? Obviously, they are worried even about the minimalist thing coming out. Number two, the minimalist thing will show, among other things, that look, a particular ruling party gets 5, 10, 50, 25 times more than all the others put together. Number two, it shows, with some amount of industry and research, that it has collected, possibly from persons or institutions or sources, which can then be separately checked whether they were first-timers, whether they were regular donors. It can be checked not from the SBI but from other data. And as one of my colleagues pointed out in an earlier press conference, it appears that it can also be checked as to whether you can match the number of ED, IT, and other threats with the number of first-time donors. Now, these are all things which will require some further research. Nobody is saying that the SBI is going to give it to you. But the SBI will give you some base information, and you can see the fear, the trembling in the government, even on that base information. So you can imagine that people who will do some research and some collation and some cross-mapping can unearth something pretty interesting, which is what the government is scared about.
Okay, two last questions to you, Mr. Singhvi. One, as we near the election season, besides being a huge political tool that this data may emerge as, there's also this thing about corporates being hand in gloves with political parties. Would you explain to our viewers just how important would it be in this particular case where electoral bonds was largely anonymous, those who are selling vis-a-vis those who are buying was not out in public domain, even for partially this information to come out, has some form of democracy, at least at its bedwork. Would you agree with that?
Well, you must start, Sneha, with the fact that this was something conceived in sin, designed with ulterior motives. Forget today, forget the judgment. At its conception, at its creation, it was something motivated, mala fide, and designed to help a particular party and to conceal. And that fault can only be quashed. It can't be taken away by disclosures. It is good that it's been quashed. That was a fundamental design defect. And people know who designed it, people know who got together to design it, people know the object for its design. Don't forget that just because we have now information coming. Let's never forget the fact that the design was to make it one-sided for the ruling party and to exclude others and to keep a opacity and an opaqueness and no transparency. Number two,
okay.
There is also, of course, the fact that although the SBI cannot give you information which is readily mappable, it doesn't say that Abhishek Singhvi gave 10 rupees and Sneha gave 20 rupees. It gives base information which intrepid investigators and statisticians will give you a certain color and a certain structure. That is what the government is worried about. And number three, it is
Right.
certainly a victory for democracy because I must say the courts frequently do not walk the talk at the last mile connectivity of the order. There are many orders of the court where you have the
All right, Mr.
right
Singhvi,
vindicated, but the
I'm very
remedy.
short of time. I'm just left with 2 minutes. I'm
Yes,
sorry to intervene
I'm just
at this
finishing.
point.
You have the
One
right, but you
question.
don't have the
One
remedy.
last question.
Remedy. Here it's given the remedy also. They've walked the talk and they
One
made
last
sure the
question.
remedy
And I
comes.
have to ask you this question. Indulge me here. Sorry for interrupting you, sir, but the CA has been implemented now. CA has been implemented in India. The rules have been notified. It's out. BJP's big promise before the elections from UCC in Uttarakhand to the CAA in India. How is the opposition going to be looking at this? How is the opposition going to be going ahead with this?
Uh, First of all, I think you are a rather clever anchor, a bit naughty, I would say, that there's no connection with electoral bonds in the CAA. But you brought in the CAA. The contract was only for
There is
electoral
no
bonds.
connection, but it is
But
a big topic. I have to ask you.
yeah,
There's apologies for that.
that's a clever move, but let me tell you, CA is a totally different issue. It's not something new. We have argued about it, against it, about various things, and you will carry that crusade further. There was a lull because the CA was not being implemented. But every argument you see earlier, every argument will be revived, will be made. And there are petitions pending still on that. The Assam matters and the citizenship matters are still pending. And I don't think there'll be any let up. But obviously, in the melting pot of issues in the election, there are so many things, and you will have to, give different things different proportionality. It'll be great, but it's not given up in any manner. And I think you will find all that debate coming up again. The very fact that the government took over 2 to 3 years to notify them shows the real fear and the real hesitation of the government. Tell me one good reason why
Abhishek
it took so
Singhvi,
long to
thank you
notify.
so much for joining us.